think there's a question that the people in Wilmington need to sort of wrestle with is it better to connect with service providers who are where the money is? And I don't have a good answer. I mean, you want somebody that you can sit down across the table from. So maybe you're looking for people who have the connections to money.
Is there anything you feel that you would share with your younger self? I feel like that's a good icebreaker. That, you're going through these really turbulent times, or, getting into investing for the first time. Is there anything you look back on to say to your younger self, especially with some of these folks just starting out or maybe in the middle of their entrepreneurship journey? Is there anything you would want to say to your younger self that you feel would be helpful?
Yeah, one for me is definitely around after you've had some amount of success. So for us, like for Status Manage, like the company was doing well, and I feel like I really could use an executive coach. Managing people is not something that comes naturally to me at all. So I think having and my co-founders were my brother and my best friend, who were also very young and learning how to manage people themselves. So I think getting an executive coach is kind of a no-brainer. So
I would second that, and just to pile on, Co-Founders Capital in the Triangle, it's a venture fund. They are on Fund 2.
Tim right here.
Oh, hey Jim, Fund 3.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good.
Fund 3.
This also ties back to the point I was making about coachability and being a learning CEO. Now, what I would have told myself was that if you never fail, you're not trying enough stuff. It's like skiing or like playing tennis or any kind of sport. If you never fall down, if you never play with people who are better than you are, you don't get any better.
What I would tell my younger self is know the investment world. Like, I didn't know it, and it hurt me. It hurt me in a number of ways. From the first pitches that I was doing to all the way up to the day we sold the business. By that time I knew enough about it, but like, it's not that hard. Like, look at retrospectively, it's not that difficult at all. I mean, from seed to angel to Series A, B, C, like your competitors, like you can find out what they did at those various stages and what the milestones are that you want to hit at various stages and what your cap tables are going to look like, and have cap table goals. Like, I didn't know any of that. And so that's what I would tell my younger self. The only other thing that you already heard, I'll just reiterate, is I haven't seen the solopreneur thing work very, very often, or without a board. And so I'm full disclosure, like I have a strong personality. Like I'm kind of a knucklehead, but I knew that about myself. So when I did have a board, it was pretty easy for them to call me out and me be able to accept it. So I'd say that's something that is essential, like that self-awareness level, to be able to recognize when you're getting advice. A lot of times my board had saved me from myself. And then sometimes I said, because I grew some credibility with them, or a decent amount of credibility, I'd say, my gut really tells me this. They'd be like, okay, we're going to trust your gut. You're the guy in the seat. So it's, and I also had an initial partner on Player Space. So
It's very rare that knuckleheads are self-aware.
that's why I disclosed it. So you.
Which leads me to the next question. So you mentioned, getting executive coach, having a solid team. Jan, you mentioned this in terms of what you look for in investment, and Ty, you went through so many challenges and your team stuck by you. What are some of the biggest characteristics of a team do you think these entrepreneurs should be looking for when they're recruiting talent or recruiting people to be a part of their board or just in general, people that they trust to go to? Let's take that first.
Yeah, it's really that servant leadership mentality. Like, everybody knew I didn't care. Like, I didn't care what I did. I would play customer support. I'd play sales. You've heard the old cliche, clean the bathrooms. Like, I actually cleaned the bathrooms because we didn't want to pay money for cleaning services. You just do anything. And nobody's, it's got to be a genuine thing. Like, you got, as a leader, as a founder, it has to be genuine. You can't, everybody has to know you don't feel any better than anybody else at the company. We're all here for each other. And that's real. It could very easily been worked out a different way. And we're all there for the same purpose. Like purpose of Player Space, for example, was really about the human spirit. We wanted to help people be celebrated for the sports that they play, not the sports that they watch. And that went across all different sports, right? Or all different levels, whether it was a rec league, a church league, or something much higher than that. So, and we all rallied around that. So it was that purpose, and also, like I said, and taking that servant leadership mentality. Or not just taking the mentality, being it.
Well said.
Thank you.
I think that one of the things I often hear from entrepreneurs is, I want to hire so-and-so because they're so excited to work for me, or they're so excited about the company. And that is like the criteria that they're hiring for is excitement, not for ability or aptitude. So excitement's great, but let's make sure you're hiring people who have the attitude and the aptitude. They may not have the precise experience, but if they've got the proper attitude and the aptitude and the willingness to learn, that's often more valuable in a startup than somebody who's got 20 years of experience doing the same thing.
Yeah. I think the other thing to add to that is like self-directedness in a startup. Like there's so many different fires to be put out, or so many opportunities to pounce on, and I think people that are sitting back and waiting to be told to do something, or they feel like, that's not in my job description, so I'm gonna let someone else worry about that. That's like the last kind of person I think you want on your team in the early days.
Yeah, and I guess to piggyback on that question, how do you find these people? People aren't always knocking down the door. In most cases, I hear from a lot of startups I talk to, they're having a really hard time finding those people with those characters you're looking for. So would you have any recommendations on how to source that talent? Is there anything you could share with some of the group, some of the folks in the room on how to get access, or where to look for those folks?
Should we let Steve start? Yeah. Since instead of making it last every time.
I don't know if I have any answer to this. Yeah, I would say that, let's see. I think I kind of run in B2B SaaS startup circles, and the kinds of people that are very self-directed and are interested in the space and want to improve themselves and the companies that they work for, and this is a weird answer, but they talk about it and they write about it on their blog or on Twitter or on LinkedIn. And for me, that's a great signal that someone that actively cares about bettering themselves and will care about bettering the company that they work in.
Talk to people. Talk to angel investors, whether they're your investors or not. Talk to your attorneys, your accountants. Go to co-working events, come to things like this, and talk to people before and after about what you're looking for, because it could be that the person you're talking to's next door neighbor is the right person for you to meet. So keep connecting.
So it's real. That's tough. That's as tough as it gets, right? You gotta have good people around you. the wrong hire is really, really expensive in terms of cash and morale and productivity. I mean, like, and so I'll just give you my experience. Early on, I don't know, I mean, I got playing basketball. Like, that was the only thing I really cared about in my life. You know, my wife and kids.
They're not here, right? They're not here.
I'm just but so like it was always about putting teams together, you know? If you went and played pickup ball, you lost at the best playground, you didn't get back on. So if you were a captain, you had to pick the right team. So I took that mentality into when I would hire for early stage startups, including the last one. And I would hire attitude and potential because you couldn't afford experience and talent. You can't afford it. And even if you can afford a few of them, it's really a lot of time and energy and money to get that person. So for me, it was, look for talent or look for potential, look for attitude, and try to network through people that you know and through people that they know, and then be ready to grow that person. Like I also had, like I said, and that basketball mentality. I had a coach's mentality. Like I genuinely wanted to help people be better at being themselves. Better players make a better team. So growing those people. Now we got to a point where, all right, that only gets you to a certain level, and thinking about your own entrepreneurial experiences or career experiences, there's a point where experts do what experts do. Find an expert recruiting firm. It's a lot less expensive than the wrong hire. So, so that's the path that we took, and that's one of those things where I can say we didn't experience any deaths. We experienced a lot of life.
So to your point about you can't afford the person who is very high level, a lot of times you don't want that person, particularly if all they've done is big company, because they aren't accustomed to being scrappy. They'll cost you a lot of money, and they aren't used to cleaning the bathroom
That's right.
or all the things you do when you're a startup.
100%.
Servant leadership you were talking about there. So I'll shift a little bit to the investing side of things. This question is probably a little bit more for Steve and Jan, but in terms of investing, what made you want to get involved in that? In terms of, Steve, you came out of owning a company and now you're looking to invest. So, and Jan, I know with the new fund, what's drawing you to invest in these companies? And maybe a two-part question: what type of companies? I know everyone says tech, but is there something more unique that you're looking for that you feel like you can really drive value based on so much experience that you have?
So I got involved, I kind of fell into angel investing. I knew it was a thing. We were living in Chicago, and there was Hyde Park Angels, which was a big network associated with the University of Chicago. And I was intrigued, and I had been involved in angel-backed companies and venture-backed companies. So I knew that this was an option. I had some opportunities to invest in a couple of startups. One of them was Showing Time, which has turned out to be incredibly successful. The other two were crash and burn, really bad. Lost it all, which happens. That's if you never fall down, you don't learn anything. But when we moved here in 2010, I heard that this Triangle Angel Partners thing was getting organized, and I saw some great potential for that for me. One is better deal flow. I knew that I would see more opportunities as part of a group than by myself. Better diversification. So instead of being able to, with these funds, the commitment is a minimum of $50K spread out over 4 years. If you're going to invest $50K individually, you're probably not going to be able to do more than 5 deals, likely only 2. But with a fund, you could be in 10, 12, whatever. So you get diversification, you get the wisdom of crowds. So you get to invest in things that you don't know anything about. So what do we invest in? We don't do drug development because it takes too long and costs too much money, but we've done consumer products, we've done med devices, if the approval process isn't too long. We've done software, we've done some e-commerce, so pretty eclectic. We've co-invested with co-founders, we've co-invested with Carolina Angel Network and with the Launch Place. So, oh, and then the last benefit is if you're new to a community as I was, it's a fabulous way to get to know other people who have similar interests. And it's a great platform to get to know entrepreneurs. So if you had a nice exit and want a community of investors, let's talk.
Marlena, can you speak in the mic so Brian can make sure?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
Wow, multiple mics.
Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
I don't have any of the experience here as Jan. I think I've done 4 individual investments in the Raleigh and Durham area. They've all been kind of boring B2B SaaS. I feel like it's like the thing that I at least know and kind of understand, so I kind of stick to my lane there a little bit. Yeah, I think things I'm looking for are, obviously, good connection with the founder, smart team. I think like a desire or like a path towards becoming a venture scale business is important. I think a lot of people think like, oh, if you want to get funding, like venture is like the only avenue out there. And frankly, they don't even have a plan or desire to grow, to make a shot at like creating a venture scale company. So kind of thinking about that's important. Yeah, and then just, I don't know, like areas that I'm interested in or feel like I have some perspective on, I feel like I try and focus on those as well. But yeah, it's also just, it's a good way to stay connected to the startup community just in general. So frankly, part of it is that, so.
It's a great way to stay really engaged in the community and still control your own schedule.
Yes.
Great. Well, I have a question for the audience. How many companies or entrepreneurs are here? Can you raise your hand? Okay. How many service providers are here to support these entrepreneurs? Okay, great. One of the questions Jim sent over, which I thought was really interesting, was, in the triangle, there's a lot of service providers that help these startups and often make connections to investors like Jan and others, and just in that way make sure that they can connect to the capital, because ultimately they're going to stay their client if they have the capital and continue to pay for their services. So one of the things I think Jim had mentioned in his questions to me was that he's not seeing a lot of that in Wilmington. So what advice, if any, would you give to some of the service providers here to make sure that they're connecting, or maybe connecting with you to make sure that they're making, connecting those dots to help and provide resources for those entrepreneurs? I know that's a hard.
So what I mean is, like, Fred Hutchison is very involved in connecting his startup clients to investors. So that is not something that's happening here, and it's a missing piece of our community. Do you have any advice on how we could maybe kickstart that?
Well, I think Jane did a great job of putting
Jan, you got so offended with this.
Kidding. Not everyone should get a hold of Jan, but if there are general resources, I know Jim, you do a really great job with your newsletter, but not everyone has access to that. So maybe there are additional resources through, I think Jane, you're a member of a lot of organizations. I know Onboard NC, there's 100, I can't remember Wilmington. Thinking the name, the Women Organization Wilmington or UNCW, but there's some organizations here, but in general, getting those service providers to connect those to anyone within their network that can potentially help them, I think is really critical. So is there any suggestions you would make to some of the clients or some of the entrepreneurs or startups you work with on how they can better connect with resource providers that can help them?
So one thing I would, sort of a lesson learned, one of the startups from here that I was advising moved to the West Coast, and they really felt like they needed to work with a West Coast attorney because of the connections out there and the connections to money out there. And so I think there's a question that the people in Wilmington need to sort of wrestle with is it better to connect with service providers who are where the money is? And I don't have a good answer. I mean, you want somebody that you can sit down across the table from. So maybe you're looking for people who have the connections to money. And maybe Jim can help you figure that out.
It's a little later in the game, but maybe there's a way to pull it up earlier. For us, the best resource that we came across were our investment bankers. We used a boutique shop out of Raleigh, and we got connected with them pretty early on, just because of, like I mentioned earlier, with all the activity in the space. So we were pretty interesting to folks, even though we weren't like really of any size yet. The space was pretty big, so we got some phone calls, and one of our board members who had used this investment banking firm before introduced us, and so they just always stayed in touch, and they were like, hey, so if you need this, here's 3 or 4 providers. I mean, I'm telling you, like, they were fantastic. Always. Number 1 was always number 1, number 2 was always number 2, and number 3 was always number 3, and number 3 was still great. Like, so I don't know the solution. I just wanted to share that it was like that boutique investment banking or any kind of investment bank. Because, like, when it gets to the point of selling the company, you know, it's like a real estate agent, right? Like they want to get that deal closed quickly, so they're working through all the different providers, the mortgage company, whatever. Same with investment bankers. So they're already in that game every single day. So I think there might be a way to kind of like pull that forward and help both by getting exposure for the entrepreneurs to that world, and vice versa.
Okay, last question, and then we'll go to Q&A from the audience.
Yeah, so I like Jan's point of just talking to people, ask the question. If, you never know who the real estate guy doing your pad, you don't know who he knows. You know, he could know someone, at a top ranking VC that could be someone interested. So I think the first point is talking to everyone, having those conversations. I think the last question I want to ask was really about resiliency. I mean, there's definitely the 9 lives that Todd presented. I think it was 8, but it was close to 9.
I didn't have another one.
Yeah, experience. I don't think you need another one.
You would have been here today.
You went through a lot. You went through a lot. You experienced a lot of challenges, and even with all those challenges, you didn't sell to Jerry Jones. I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs experience some pretty heavy hits, and really just what made you keep going? What made you not want to sell to him, even through all the challenges you were experiencing? It seems like an easy, I say this way from a high level, like an easy way out. Like, what kept you going?
Yeah, full disclosure, I wanted to sell. It was my board. That was a situation where my board protected me from me. And it wasn't contentious. It was contentious, but in a healthy way, and it took a little bit of time for me to be like, you guys are right. You guys are right. Because I was tired. I wanted to take the easy way. And like I said, we were like, money wasn't great at the time. And so having that board, it's absolutely critical. And then on the complete other side of it, it's purpose. Like it gets real tough real fast if you're not working for a purpose. And all the resiliency in the world can't combat that. It just can't. I've seen it experienced on both sides of it.
I don't have anything to add with that. That was wonderful.
Yeah, that all resonates. I think to that last point you're making, having something, I don't know, having something else that you're working towards, like I don't know, it's very easy to kind of keep hitting that next milestone, and if the only thing you're shooting for is like one milestone ahead, like it's very easy to, become demotivated after you get there. And so I think having something like bigger that you're aspiring to is very important.
Okay, who has some questions from the audience?
You mentioned you work for a company for equity, right? How'd that come about? Did you ask, did they ask, is there a standard amount you asked for? And also for Jan, being on a board, you took stock options. How's that come about? What do you ask for? Is there a standard rate that you ask for?
Oof, she probably has a better answer than me. It was a wild hair suggestion. It was, this could work. Let's just go for it and see what happens. I think we just like ballpark, like, what would, if I were working for cash, like what would a reasonable rate be? And let's just convert that to equity, add a small premium on top of that, and we'll just go with that. I think it's maybe also different that the guy that I was working for, so Tyler, the CEO of Launch Notes, he's been one of my best friends for, forever. So for us, it was a very, it's a very relaxed situation.
So when I start working with a company, it really depends on, I'll only do it if I really feel like I can add value. But if I do think I can, then I will ask between 1/4 and 2 percentage points of stock options, knowing that if we are in any way successful, I'm gonna get diluted down to practically nothing. And then if I ended up serving on a fiduciary board, what should happen is an annual grant. So for every year you serve, you get some more stock options or restricted stock or cash as the company gets more and more able to afford you, so to speak. But for that early advisory work, that's what I look for, the 1/4 to 2%.
Okay, and were you getting income both years? Were you getting income in the meantime too, monthly, weekly, or no?
No, with startups, there's no cash. They have no cash. Yeah, I've paid taxes on restricted stock that I will never have a gain on, and I paid taxes on it. So be very careful about that. There's a whole 83, but there's a whole lot of stuff you can do to make sure that doesn't happen. But that has happened to me.
I'm curious, so for Player Space, for the ideas that you guys had that you incubated into really successful businesses, what was the point in time in which you thought this was a good idea, and who was that sounding board that says, yeah, it's a great idea, you should take it to the next level, the next space? I feel like lots of people think, I have a really great idea. Who are the folks that you ran that by to say, that's got legs, go do that? There are definitely folks who would be interested in doing that. And then what was that solid progression from whiteboard to sort of pitch deck? What was your progression?
For Player Space, it was when our first customer said that a piece of technology that we developed for them took what used to be about a 3, 4, 5 weeks worth of work process for them and condensed it into about a day or 2. And so that was at that point, I think we already had a little bit of seed money. And so we had a board and said, okay, look, we're ready to go. Let's get some things in place. And so that's when we really started to get some things in place and plan for the longer haul. That example extrapolates out though. It really, for us anyway, I mean, like there's a lot of early stage companies that go to investors with big ideas and get a whole bunch of money somehow with some dream pitch. And, but that wasn't us. It was, we were, okay, here's the real value that we're providing. Here's how that translates into cash from customers. Let's scale that.
In North Carolina, unless you have been a successful serial entrepreneur, no one is going to fund your idea.
Right.
But to answer your specific question and to pile on to what you're saying, the only people that can tell you it's a great idea is people who are going to buy it. You can do interviews, you can try to explore the problem, you should explore what problem does the customer have before you get wedded to a precise solution, because what you build may totally miss the mark.
For Status Page, we had, frankly, a lot of like internal conviction. We built a prototype and kind of shopped the idea around and got a pretty tepid response from a lot of people that we thought were our target customers. But we'd seen some of like the best companies in, I don't know, in B2B SaaS. So like GitHub had made their own bespoke Status Page, Heroku made their own, and we just had a really strong conviction that like, now, I think if there was an easy way for other SaaS companies to do something similar, that this would be a no-brainer for them. And so we actually kind of had, I don't know, a little bit of the opposite experience, like tepid response that ended up working out anyway. So it's hard to know.
So just something to add to that. If you have like a really, really, like what you think is brilliant business idea, you can go to bed that night knowing that 10 other people are already working on it. Like that's all there is to it. One other thing that I thought about this, and this was pretty big for us when it came to when was that time to put the foot on the gas pedal. We struck some, and this is an important. I would say this to anybody in any business at any stage: strategic partnerships, especially if you can get exclusive, multi-dependent strategic partnerships. We ended up striking a deal with YUSA, and so this answers the question directly. We ended up striking a deal with YUSA, which was the governing body of all YMCAs, where we were the only distributor of their swim lesson curriculum through our mobile app, and we were also the only company that could put their volunteers and part-time employees and coaches for their sports leagues through a preferred background check provider, and we integrated that into the whole process and integrated all of the member management companies, which were partners of ours. We were program management, they were member management, managed all their, we had technical integrations with all of them as well that service the YMCAs. So all of that data had to come through us. That's why I got to the point where even when I had that Jerry Jones situation, I knew that stuff was in the works. I knew we were about to pull that off. I knew that if you wanted the YMCA market, you were going to have to buy it from us. So when we had all that in place, asking for money, we were able to get it on pretty good terms. And that was the last amount of funding that we had to get before we were in it. It was pedal to the metal.
A self-funded medical device company that we've had success year over year. And I'm just wondering, when is the opportune time to consider selling?
Jan, you want to refill for you?
Well, yeah. If you have a successful med device company, you should talk to an investment banker. I mean, seriously. You'll pay for the service, but from my experience, what you'll see is that the returns to that investment in a banker who knows your space is hard to measure in terms of maximizing your return and actually getting the deal done. And they will tell you, you need to do these 3 things before you're ready to sell.
Great, thank you.